Welcome back to another Purpose Served podcast episode. I'm your host, Darrell Wingfield. Welcome back to another episode. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I do apologize for, not uploading as of recently. It's been a whirlwind of the last couple days, to be quite honest with you guys. With me, going through this whole car process, trying to find a car. Still don't have a car, which freaking sucks. Let me tell you. But, still working through that and still trying to manage everything that's going on. It has been fairly difficult, but I'm not trying to stress too much about it. I'm really trying to, not trying to, but I'm just understanding perspective. You have people out there that honestly that don't have a car, that don't got certain things, but yet and still they live their life, in spite of not having certain things. And to me, understanding another person's perspective, understanding a perspective that's outside of your own is a great way to gain wisdom and gain knowledge for this experience that we live in. Through perspective, especially looking at other people, you can learn of like what to do and what not to do, and from hearing this podcast in general, that should give you guys a general sense of that, what will work for you and what don't work for you. And I preach that all the time on this podcast. There's a lot that I want to talk about. I'm not even going to lie. Today, I had a mindful meditation class with Grace. Shout out to Grace, man. She's awesome. But today, the focus was on being vulnerable, And for me, for such a long time, that was such a hard thing to do. A feeling that was hard to experience, due to the fact of, like, I wouldn't want to say my upbringing. It was never really, I guess I wouldn't want to say looked at as a good thing to be vulnerable. Like, you had to have thick skin in order to manage, like, where I lived. Even to this day, man, that it makes you lion-hearted. But at the same time, I noticed that once you're so set on, being so guarded up with your emotions and not really showing who the true you is in certain moments, that can be a great hindrance. And oftentimes that can lead to a lot of things going down and to the surface, and you suppressing a lot of emotions that you're supposed to be expressing. In certain moments, it could take something really small to trigger you to lash out. And for me, for the longest of times, that was my anger. Like, I had anger issues. I used to get mad over every single thing, But then, as of now, it just seemed like it's never that deep. Even though I do have moments where I randomly, get real mad. It's typically through competition that I would get like that, get really, really upset if I'm losing or anything. I just don't like losing at all. I don't think anybody likes losing, but I take losing to heart. And wow, this keeps going on from one thing to another. But another thing that I was going to talk to you guys about was this little streak that I've been on while playing basketball. I'm playing in this league every Sunday, and our team isn't doing too hot. We've been losing a lot of games. I think at this point we won 3 games and we lost 5, and I've been playing atrocious. I don't know if I spoke about this on a podcast previously, but if I didn't, well, voila, here we are. But I realized that I've been inside my own head, being highly critical of myself, especially, when I've been playing, and I take the game really serious, as do everybody that's like, that plays it competitively. You play it for the fun of it, but you also play for the heat of the competition. Feel like it's real extreme, but it feel like a battle. For me, at least, it does. That's why I love the game so much. It feels like I'm battling not against other people, but with myself. And I realize that when I do add other people into the equation, it typically messes up the way that I play because I'm not playing from the right source. If you guys understand then like what I'm saying. And to me, these are tools, like I said, through the game of basketball that I've learned, that I've seen in real life situations, in real life, scenarios. I'm reading this book, Relentless, and Tim Grover says in the book that every day you wake up, you are waking up to a war. And that war is with yourself. You wake up to it every single day. And the goal is to win the war. Don't lose to your mind. Our minds are so extremely powerful that it can override what we have to do and in a crazy way rationalize things to the point where it stops you from doing what you have to do. And that's like typically the hardest thing to do is override the rational thinking sometimes, because it may sound good, but the long-term effects is not, I wouldn't say beneficial, but it doesn't pay off in a way that you would want it to pay off. And listening to that, I guess, higher faculty that's telling you to do whatever it is you got to do, that's the way to go. Instead of being complacent with what you have and what you got. Now, that's not an issue if you want to be complacent, then go right ahead. But if you don't want to be complacent and then you tend to find yourself wanting more, wanting better, wanting to do more, then you are not a complacent person. It's good to be content, but to me, when you're complacent, that's a dangerous thing. Contentment is being like okay with, I guess, with what you have and who you are. And for me, I am content with a lot of things, but at the same time, that it's in a weird way, it keeps me grounded so I don't get too far off into the future or get revved back into the past. It always keep me in the now, which is something that I need, because everything, like I said, that's been going on as of late, with my car, me being in like a little shooting basketball slump, that's enough to make me personally lose my freaking mind. But like I said, that's where content comes into play with me and being okay with where I am right now. But at the same time, I need to get out this situation. I can't stay in this situation. And me wanting to stay in this situation, that would be me being complacent. And that's a great example of separating the two from being content and complacent. And I realized through these mindful meditation classes that I've been doing every week, as you can see by the brand that I have, this podcast and the message that I delivered, I've realized that I just go. I don't really recognize the things that at this point that I'm going through, but I just shake things off and just be ready to move on to the next thing. But in a way that can be dangerous, because I have to learn how to acknowledge the situation that I'm in, and really feel the situation out, in order to move past it properly. Because after a while, if the situation figured out and I don't have the solution in a timely manner that I do set for myself, those emotions that I suppress, they tell myself like, yo, you gotta keep going. They could find a way to seep through, in ways that I least expected, to the point where, I get angry over something real stupid. But all in all, the matter of the reason is the major situations that hasn't had a solution yet, But that's the one thing that I've been trying to keep it real with myself about, just understanding the situations that I really be in, and especially when the things aren't going my way, and not getting myself real hyped up to just be like, dust this off and get past it, but honestly understand why I got myself in a situation in the first place. Really understand it, and like I said, I'm always going to try my best to have each previous podcast correlate with the next. Now, if you heard the previous podcast, if you haven't, go back and listen. But due to the situation that I got myself into with my car, it came from me previously neglecting my responsibilities. And now that I got placed in a situation where I can't neglect them no more, I have to face them, that automatically comes with emotions, now, and I can get wrapped up in the past and be like, oh man, I should have did this, I could have did this, I could have did that. I tend to do the opposite, and I tend to be like, all right, that happened, all right, let's just fix this, instead of saying, how did that happen, how can I change that from not happening again, and then let's fix this, and like I said, I'm finding a balance within myself, and we all got to do this. We all have to find a balance. Like, shout out yet again to my little brother Devin. I had a conversation with him last night, and I talked to him how important dualities are, and these are things that I'm starting to understand. But to keep it real with you, my flaw is I tend to, like I said, I jump the gun. I go to 0 to 100 and no problem, because I have a lot of energy, and when I feel as though something needs to get done, I'm gonna try my best to get that done. But if I don't do it in a timely manner, it kind of start freaking me out. Before my first podcast was ever put out, I had one of those moments. I ordered my podcast equipment, and I told myself in the middle of October, this was going to be the date that my first podcast was going to be out. October 15th, I believe the date was. When October 15th, that day actually came, my podcast equipment was not here. So then, God honest truth, this is the things that I started thinking, just to be 100 with you guys. I started saying, why, what am I doing this podcast for? Do I really know what I'm in for? Do I really even know what I'm doing? Is this a good idea? Doubt just started creeping in like crazy, just because the podcast equipment didn't show up on a date that I expected it to. And that's the same thing, like I said, fast forward to the situation that I'm in now, that if it don't get resolved in a timely manner, all of them suppressed emotions, I know is going to find a way to come out. And now I'm just trying to handle whatever those emotions that suppressed is. Thinking and feeling, to me, is a 50-50 thing. You can't 100% just go with your analytical mind, and you can't 100% just go with how you feel, because say somebody did you wrong and did you dirty in that immediate moment, the actions that you would take based off of those emotions that you have, you most likely are going to have some consequences to pay. You feel me? That's what it is, but at the same time, the counterbalance to that is that when you think too much, you won't take an action. ain't no action going to be made. You know what I mean? So for example, somebody did do you dirty and you know you're not going to do nothing about it. It's just going to sit in your head, and then you want to just keep replaying that over and over and over again in your head. And that's not healthy. That's not healthy for your mental. That's not healthy for the people that you have around you and all of that. But the key thing to this is being vulnerable. This is honestly, doing this podcast has been helping me with that. I like challenging myself on like the daily basis. And one of the ways I like challenging myself is being vulnerable, putting myself in a vulnerable situation. Because to me, that's showing that you're putting yourself in a situation where you're in harm's way. That's what being vulnerable is. You're putting yourself in harm's way. But there's a twist to it. You're putting yourself in harm's way, and I believe that this is gone honest truth. The feeling that I have when it comes to being vulnerable, you gain a real connection with people in the environment that's around you. Is genuine, instead of not being vulnerable and being a shell of yourself and acting like things don't bother you, acting like, you know, the world around you isn't affecting you. But then behind closed doors, it actually is, you know? And in order to help you guys with what you guys are listening to like every week from me, I think that it's important, like I always say, to live my words. You know, I wouldn't feel right if I did it, you know. And just to even keep it real with you guys even more, I recorded a podcast, I would want to say last week, and I was 15 minutes into talking. I think I was like around this point, to be quite honest, but I wasn't feeling it. And I can feel myself. I'm just talking for the hell of it. And at that point, I was just like, nah, I'm done. I'm cutting this off, you know, and I'm not going to upload this. But that's the craziest thing. I had this idea in my head that I want to do, because I do have a couple of them that I saved that I was just like, I'm not feeling this. But I want to upload that in a way to show that a lot of these things, it don't go smooth every single time that I do them. And also, right now, I'm a one-man army. I'm doing all of this stuff on my own. Before, I took pride in doing things on my own. I took pride in just doing things by myself. But as of late, I'm realizing that's not it. You're not going to get anywhere trying to do anything on your own. And this is something interesting that I recently just learned from another book that I'm reading, A Hero with 1,000 Faces, by Joseph Campbell. Great book. I'm only in like the first, like, I want to say 60 pages of it. I recently just got it not too long ago. But this book has been giving me insight on how important human connection is and how it's lined up with, our survival, like how we survive. It's important that we are unified, you know, in certain ways. So, for example, depending on where you go on any part of this world, for the most part, that area that you go into, the country that you go into, or the state, the city, is going to have a particular vibe to it. You know, New York City has a particular vibe to it. That's how that society works. And everybody genuinely there operates the same way when they're from there. You know, and that's the same thing. Like, for example, Americans have a way of living, and it's extremely crucial to every individual's survival, that everything, it has a cohesive nature to it. And that's literally, for example, that's how our bodies work. I seem to always come by to make these comparisons because it's universal. So look, that's like I have this thought and idea that I put out all the freaking time. Like seriously, it's crazy. But somebody is gonna hear that and be like, yo, that makes perfect sense. You're not freaking crazy. But in a way, for our nervous system, it has to work in a cohesive way, and everybody got to do their job. For the nervous system to keep us functioning, and I'm talking about the nerves, all of that, and that's the same thing. Like for example, with the society that we live in, you gotta have people that run gas stations. You gotta have people that work in supermarkets. You gotta have cashiers. You gotta have the people that stock the shelves at ShopRite or whatever shopping center that you go into. But people don't think about this stuff. People just be thinking, all right, if I want a box of cereal, I'm about to go to the store and get it. But if the people weren't doing their jobs and stocking that cereal, then there's no cohesiveness. And when you have things like that and you go to the store and that cereal ain't there, there will be a problem. And when things aren't cohesive, that's going to be the case, you know. So for the grand scheme of things, I believe that when you do put yourself in a vulnerable situation and you allow that connectivity, which equals that cohesiveness, and that's why I'm doing this, to have a true, genuine, cohesive environment that people, for example, would come to, and no matter how they feeling, man, if you having a rough day, if you're having a rough week, even if you're having a great week, a great day or whatever, you know, I just want this podcast to help anybody in any walk of life in a way where it broadens their perspective and also make them feel good about what they're doing. We expose to so freaking much on a daily basis. It's so easy to lose track of yourself, man. It's so freaking easy, man. But the counterpart to that is that you can also lose yourself with being by yourself all the freaking time. You can go crazy. You need that human connection. But there, at the same time, is a such thing as too much human connection, and is a such thing as playing out that human connection in a way where you are being authentic to your environment, your society, to your friends, to your family, instead of putting on a facade for how you want them to view you, how you want them to feel about you, you know, based off of you're putting their perspective over your own. That's a dangerous life to live, man. Seriously. I never was like that, but I was like that in a sense where when things was going on around me, I chose to do what looked fun in order for me that I thought that I was solving my issues. But really, in all reality, I was putting them aside. I was submerging them, you know, and I wasn't being vulnerable about the situation that I was in. And this is something that I constantly talk about, because I know that we all get in situations like that. This life is literally full of ups and downs. It's a roller coaster ride. But the key thing is to not lose yourself through this madness. And it's so easy to do that, you know. But that's why it's really, really important to know what ticks you off. What turns you on? What gets you going? You know, what makes you sad? What makes you happy? You know, you got to keep all of this in mind. So then that way, you'll know what your trigger points would be. You'll know who to be around. You'll just know how to operate. And that way, you're living a better life, you know, than letting the distractions drive you to a life that's not something that you wanted. It's This world is shaped by intention, yo. No cat. You gotta have intent. You gotta be, and intent involves you being mindful about how you want the environment and universe to be around you, and going about putting your intent on that. This is something that I preach on this podcast all the time as well. We're all creators. I believe that's what we are here for, is to create something, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for the people around you, whether it's for the sky, the ground, or whatever. If you look around, even if you're listening, somebody had an intent to do something and they went out and they did it. Somebody had an intent to create the camera that I'm using. Somebody had an intent to create GarageBand that I'm using to record this podcast. Somebody had an intent to have this microphone that I'm using and this headphones, and they went out and they shaped their environment around their intent. This is something that I'm trying to do. And with the messages that I'm trying to present, my intent is for me pursuing the better version of myself, that it inspire you guys to do the same thing, from you guys hearing other people on a podcast, that has similar stories as you, and what their intent was and how they went about doing it, that you're no different from the next man. The next person bleed literally just how you bleed. I'm not one for putting people on pedestals, but I do commend people that do great things, but I do recognize at the same time that they're no different from me. And that's what makes me always feel like something is possible to do, even when anybody could look at my situation from an outside perspective and be like, I don't know about that. Until I start doing it, and then it's going to be like, oh, okay. For example, I'm going to just use this podcast as an example. If I just talked about doing a podcast and talked about, like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is the idea that I have. And I'm going to get started. I'm going to do it. I'm going to definitely do it. But then let time just roll on, and just keep letting time roll on, and be like, man, I'm going to do that podcast. Yo, I'm telling you, I'm going to start next month. I'm going to start the podcast next month. But you just got to go for it, man. You literally got to go for it. Understand how you feel, where you are in your current position, and then do whatever it takes to get it done. It's that simple. Thank you for tuning in for another podcast episode. If you guys made it this far, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Download the podcast if you haven't downloaded. Please check out the other previous podcasts if you haven't. Leave a comment and give me 5 stars if you do like this. I love you guys. Serve your purpose. I'm sorry about the hiatus, but I'm back in business and I'm out. Deuces.